Shalom Lekulam, and welcome to this third lesson on the mystical Shabbat. This is a lesson on the Shabbat series in which we are looking at the Shabbat from the traditional point of view, from the halachic point of view, and also from the Kabbalistic point of view. Today we're going to be talking about the prohibited works during Shabbat. And in this lesson, we're going to go a little bit deep. We're going to be going into a level that I may call it in intermediate Kabbalah. We're going to be talking about concepts of Parsufin, specifically a Parsuf called Adam Harishon, the first Adam. And it's because this Parsuf was created during three different ascensions, and these three different ascensions have to do with what we are supposed to be reminded of, what we're supposed to be connecting to as we celebrate and as we participate on this gift given by the Creator called the Shabbat day. So after the introduction, we're going to start right away talking about the prohibited works during Shabbat and these three ascensions as well. Welcome back. We're going to start right away, and in order to be able to have all this information out there in less than an hour. If it takes 1 hour and a half, this is a very in-depth lesson, we're going to be covering, like I mentioned, the prohibited works of during Shabbat, and also the three ascensions of the worlds, Kabbalistic worlds in Shabbat. And this will be something that is very important for us to understand, because when we talk about the three meals, these three meals are connected to these three ascensions. So this lesson is going to be connected to a different lesson in which we're going to be talking about these three important meals that we're supposed to have during the Shabbat day. Okay, so let's start right away. To understand how these work of the prohibited, works during Shabbat are basically classified, we're going to look at them from a halachic point of view in different ways, and we're gonna in some part of this lesson I'm gonna go over some books that talk about these prohibited works more in depth. But what you need to understand is that these malachot, these kind of works, they are related to the construction of the tabernacle in the desert, the Mishkan. Okay, so the types of work prohibited on Shabbat are derived from the 39 melachot works, a comprehensive list of activities that were involved in the construction of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, as described in the Torah. So these prohibitions are based on this type of works that were done during the construction of the tabernacle according to the Torah. So the sages went to the Torah, and according to what type of work they saw there that was needed in order to construct this Mishkan, they assign those type of work as the type of work that you're not supposed to do during Shabbat, right? These activities are considered creative work, melacha, and are therefore forbidden during Shabbat. The 39 melachot are categorized into various types of labor, and they encompass a wide range range of action. So what we're going to see is that there are 39 of them. Then there's some others that also were added as Judaism evolves with time and with the appearance of electricity and things like that, and more needed to be added by rabbinical authorities. But we're gonna go over each of these, and then at the end we're gonna see what is it that all of them have in common. Okay, so sowing, planting seeds of any activity that promotes plant growth. Plowing, preparing the ground for planting. Reaping, harvesting crops or picking fruits and vegetables. Binding sheaves, gathering harvested crops into bundles. Threshing, separating grains from their husks or stalks. Winnowing, using wind to separate grain from chaff. Selecting, sorting and selecting edible from inedible parts. Grinding, milling grain into flour. Sifting, separating finer particles from coarser ones. Kneading, mixing flour with water to make dough. Alright, so this, if you really look at it, this type of work that we just mentioned, these 10 works, are related to basically harvesting, right? To farming. Then it continues, with after you harvest and process, the flour and all that, baking, cooking or heating food. Shearing wool, removing wool from sheep. Scouring wool, cleaning the wool. Carding wool, untangling wool fibers. Dyeing, coloring wool or other materials. Spinning, turning fibers into thread or yarn. Warping, preparing threads for weaving. Making two loops, setting up the loom. Weaving, interlacing threads to make fabric. Separating two threads, adjusting or fixing the threads in the loom. So now we see that the other one was basically harvesting and converting the harvest into bread. Now what we're seeing is that we are now removing wool from a sheep, and what we're doing now from this wool that we are getting from the sheep is that we're making this into a fabric, right? And now it continues with tying, making a knot, untying, undoing a knot, sewing, stitching fabrics together, tearing, ripping fabric often to sew it again, trapping. Now we're going to different, this is hunting, right? It went from farming, let's say vegetables, right? Fruits and things like that, to clothing, how to make clothes. Now we're going to hunting, capturing animals for eating, right? Trapping, capturing animals. Slaughtering, killing animals for food. Flaying, skinning the animals. Tanning, processing animal hides. Smoothing, scraping hides to make them usable. Marking, making lines to cut or write. And what is marking in there? The reason for that is that when the sheep were killed and everything, the muscle and everything was used, back then, nothing was wasted. The whole animal was used, including the skin. So the skin was basically processed in a way that it will become kind of like a paper made of the skin of the sheep, and that paper will have lines or marks in which somebody will write. And today's Torah scroll, you're gonna see that they're made from skin, animal skin, and they have these lines. And if you look really close, you're gonna see that those lines are basically guides in order for the scribes to write the Hebrew letters in a straight line, right? Cutting to shape, cutting materials to a specific size or shape. Writing, inscribing two or more letters. Erasing, removing writing with the intent to write two or more letters. Building, constructing structures. Demolishing, destroying structures. kindling a fire, starting a fire, extinguishing a fire, putting out a fire, putting the finishing touch, completing any item, carrying, moving objects between domains, private and public spaces. And we're going to be talking about this last one for a little bit as well. So what we see here is their prohibitions. I remember when we were and my wife and I were in an Orthodox, modern Orthodox congregation. A family member of mine brought a pencil, and as the rabbi was giving his teaching, she was writing, and the rabbi mentioned to her, since she was in modern Orthodox, that on Saturdays we don't write. And she, wanted clarification for that. And it's because one of the prohibitions, of writing is creating something. And this is the whole thing. We are here seeing that these 39 melachot are related in the sense that we are creating or changing the nature of one item to another, or changing the position of something to another place, right? And all these things, when you look at it, are prohibited on Shabbat, because Shabbat is supposed to be considered a day in which there should be no correction, there should be no changes in anything, because Shabbat in itself is perfect. So there's no need to be creating, there's no need to be fixing, there's no need to change, to be changing anything. And this is something, that we need to keep in mind, that all these works have to do with that. We don't need to change the nature of that. What we're going to see is that this type of work, and according to the Kabbalists, tell us, that specifically there are two types of Shabbat, right? There's the Shabbat that is a temple in time, and there's also the Shabbat that is a spiritual Shabbat. And what is the difference between a spiritual Shabbat and the one that is a temple in time? Both of them are spiritual, right? But one is more like personal Shabbat. You can attain that level of Shabbat anytime, in any place. It's not confined to the calendar day of Saturday or Sabbath or Shabbat. This one is a Shabbat that is different, that you can achieve anytime, anywhere. And the difference between the personal Shabbat, which is, let's say, in your time to study at 3 a.m. in the morning, if you practice, as a Kabbalist prescribe that, to get up early in the morning and study Kabbalah at that time, study Torah at that time, that will be considered your own personal spiritual Shabbat. The difference between that Shabbat and the one that is confined to the calendar, which is the one that the whole congregation of Israel celebrate, is that in the one that is confined to the calendar, we celebrate it as a people all together, one heart, one soul, right? The personal Shabbat is more an individual level. It's more in the individual level. And even though in the one that is the Shabbat that is confined to the calendar, the seventh day, we have these 39 prohibitions, when it comes to the spiritual Shabbat that a person celebrates, or achieve or attains, a level of Shabbat that the person attains, you're going to see is a level in spirituality that is attained. The person doesn't have the same restrictions. They can do anything of these of these 39 melachot. There's no restrictions, and we're gonna see why. Right? It's the big difference between the two. During that time, we don't do any creative work, right? On the calendar. But then when it comes to the personal Shabbat, we can do work. We can write. We can do different things like that, right? So that's something that we need to keep in mind, because you're gonna hear the Kabbalists saying that Shabbat is a state of spirituality. It's not necessarily a day in the week, and you can achieve Shabbat anytime. If you want to achieve that level of Shabbat, you have to work in order to raise your soul to a certain level. But that's a different kind of Shabbat than the one that we are talking about, which is the whole congregation. Like I mentioned before, in addition to these 39 categories, rabbinical laws extend these prohibitions to ensure the spirit of the rest and sanctity of the Shabbat is maintained. For example, there are activities also that were prohibited in modern times, such as using electronic devices, handling money, and engaging in business transactions are also prohibited, and they're considered forms of work or distractions from the restful nature of the day. Simply, we don't change anything during this spiritual time, right? We are not supposed to change anything. We're not supposed to be thinking about changing anything. There's restriction, and the word restriction is very important, because the word restriction means we're restricting our ego, that they were not receiving the light for the sake of our egoistic nature. We're receiving the light in order to give pleasure back to the Creator, right? Now, in Shabbat, as I mentioned before, we're going to be doing some in-depth, or taking a look at this more in depth. So in Shabbat, we talk about 3 ascensions. And the reason that Shabbat is so important, not only at the individual level, but mostly at the collective level, the collective level of Shabbat is confined to the calendar because it's a way in which we can make sure that at least most of the congregation of Israel is celebrating this, or is attaining this light, or are receiving this gift of Shabbat all together at the same time. Not everybody in their own time, but everybody together as one man and one soul. And it's an emulation. We're trying to emulate as we come together. Doesn't matter which branch of Judaism you are. If you are keeping the Shabbat according to traditions of your branch of Judaism, as long as you're keeping Shabbat, you're emulating, together with the rest of the congregation of Israel, the first soul that existed during the creation of the worlds. And according to Kabbalists, after the breaking of the vessels, there was a need to correct the breaking. And in order to correct that breaking, a new world needed to be created, and that's the word of Atzilut. Now, that word of Atzilut gave birth to other words like Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah. And each of these words are divided into 2,000 levels, which are called 6,000 years of the development of the nature of egoism, or the development of the soul. And also you're gonna see that this is also the measurements that is used in order to remember, we talked about the last one of the restriction, the carrying, moving objects. There are restrictions, right? And the rabbis have this law of Eruvim, in which there's limitations around certain areas, so they can carry certain things and consider it, like it is within the confines of the Shabbat area for a person to carry stuff. So this is the measurement as well. The 2,000, that would be 6,000 amas, as they call it, So, but we're not going to touch base in that. What you need to understand is that the words started ascending, right? The word, as I was at this level, then there were 3 ascensions. The first ascension was the word of Bria entered what is called the word of Atzilut. Then the word of Yetzirah entered the word of Atzilut. And then Asiyah, when it entered the word of Atzilut, there was actually a creation of a soul in there, and that's Adam Harishon. So when Asiya and Yesirah. When Yesirah actually entered the world of Atzilut, a soul was created, and in order for the elevation, the complete elevation of these three words to happen, they needed the help of this Parsuf called Adam Harishon, which is the first Adam, which is the Adam that we talk about in the Bible, not to be confused with Adam Katmond, which is a different Parsuf in a higher, much higher level. This is Adam Harishon, the one Parsuf that broke into pieces after he fell down. Falling down means that after he was partaking of these vessels of bestowal, he started partaking from the vessels of reception, and that's when after these words ascended, they fell down, and that's what it's called, the fall of Adam. And with this fall of Adam, there was also another Shevirat Hakelim. This was the Shevirat, of the soul, the breaking of the soul. And with that also, there were a whole bunch of sparks or souls that fell into the Mador Klipot, which is a place of the Klipot. So that's why, because this place is called the place of the Klipot, the place of these husks or vessels that capture the light and let it escape. This is the reason why we need to be constantly changing. Our spiritual work and physical work, it is inside these 6,000 years or 6 days of creation. So 6 days we will work, and on the 7th day, 7th millennium, we need to rest, because the Creator rested on the 7th day. The Creator basically, what has done is, because we are down here, we fell down to the place of the Klipot, we can ascend by our own effort and have what we call our personal spiritual Shabbat. But the Creator gave us a gift, and that gift was a day during the week in which we can receive that light all together as a congregation. In this case, if we all participate and observe the Shabbat, we are doing these 3 ascensions: the Erev Shabbat, the day of Shabbat, and then the afternoon of Shabbat, in which we receive all this light. So it's a very interesting teaching. So the principle of not making changes during Shabbat is deeply rooted in Jewish law, halakha, and tradition, emphasizing rest, sanctity, and the distinction between the holy and the mundane. This concept is based on several key reasons: rest and spiritual renewal, holiness and separation, and avoiding creative work, melacha. The rest and spiritual renewal is because Shabbat is intended as a day of rest and spiritual renewal, modeled after the biblical account of creation. According to Genesis, God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th day. By refraining from creative work, melacha, a Jewish person emulates God's rest, allowing themselves to rejuvenate physically, mentally, and spiritually. Now, when it comes to the holiness and separation, Shabbat is considered a holy day set apart from the rest of the days. So you can read it. Separate from the rest of the weekdays. The cessation of work and avoidance of changes help maintain this separation. Preserving the sanctity of Shabbat, it creates a distinct and elevated time that is different from ordinary weekdays. Dedicated to spiritual pursuits, family, and community. And then avoiding melacha, creative work. The Torah prohibits 39 categories of work, melachot, on Shabbat, which include activities that involve creating, building, or altering. This prohibition encompasses a wide range of actions such as cooking, writing, building, and even minor adjustments and repairs. The idea is to refrain from any activity that exerts control over one's environment, highlighting human humility before the Creator. So this is important, there's other stuff as well. Now, another thing or other uh, thing that we need to keep in mind when it comes to Shabbat is not only rest and spiritual renewal, holiness and separation, avoiding creative work, it's also to focus on being rather than doing. Shabbat encourages a shift from doing to being by not making changes or engaging in productive tasks. Individuals can focus on the present moment, relationships, prayer, study, and reflection. It fosters mindfulness and presence, aligning with the spiritual and restful nature of the day. So it's a day that we can use for meditation. It's a day that we can use for introspection and connect to that light. That Shabbat is it's available during this day as a gift from the Creator, right? Also, maintaining consistency and tradition. The consistency of Shabbat observance across generations and communities reinforces Jewish identity and continuity. Remember, we talked about the importance of doing this calendar-based Shabbat, right? The seventh day, against, or compared to the individual Shabbat, which can be anytime, anywhere, in your own moment. This one has to do with a community, and it reinforces this identity and continuity. The collective refrain from work and change creates a shared experience of rest and holiness, strengthening communal bonds and perpetuating traditions. It's also symbolic of redemption. Um, and the reason for this, is that we're gonna see later. It has to do with this attainment of this world of Atzilut, going higher. Connecting to that world, elevating our soul to that level, not only individually but as a collective as well. In Jewish eschatology, this is from the religious point of view, Shabbat is a foretaste of the Messianic age, a time of peace, perfection, and divine presence. By refraining from making changes or exerting creative power, you symbolically anticipate and participate in this future reality where the world is a state of harmony and completeness. So that's why you're going to see that the Kabbalists tell us that this day is a taste of the world of Atzilut, right? Because what is happening is that even though we are in this state in Shabbat, if we observe Shabbat properly, we participate on these three ascensions that are happening, and these three ascensions have nothing to do with our efforts. These ascensions are a gift that the Creator is giving us. Basically, the Creator is telling us, I am parking over here with the bus, get on the bus and I'll take you there. There's no effort, there's no creative work that you need to do in order to attain this level of the Olam Atzilut, also known as the world to come, also known as the future millennium, the seventh millennium, and also known as the Messianic world or Messianic age. Okay, so keep that in mind, because Shabbat is much more than just a day of rest. It has a lot of symbolism, a lot of light, a lot of things that have to do with Gamar Hatikun, the end of all corrections. And this is very important to keep in mind. It's not just a day that we rest because the Creator said rest. We're not doing it in order to follow what the Torah said. We're doing it because there's much more. It's a gift that the Creator gave us, and we need to take advantage that the Creator has given us this gift. And there's no effort. The only effort we need to do is not to work that day, not to do any malachot. Now, the principles and practices surrounding Shabbat, including the prohibition of making changes and engaging in work, are extensively discussed in various Jewish texts. And here's some key sources. And I wanted to add this because a lot of people may be asking where all these ideas come from. How come, that you have this tradition and these traditions and that. Where do I get the information for this, right? The first source, is the Torah. You have to go to the Torah. In Genesis, you're gonna see that this book of Bereshit, Genesis, describes God resting on the seventh day after creating the world, establishing the basis for Shabbat as a day of rest. Now, in Exodus, you're also gonna see a reference to this day, and in Exodus and Deuteronomy, the Ten Commandments include the command to observe the Shabbat. Okay, and is linking them to both creation and the exodus of Egypt. So that's why when we are doing the prayers of Shabbat, we are praying and we said, that this is a remembrance of creation, and also, a remembrance of the exodus from Egypt, to make sure that Shabbat is not only about creation, it's also about redemption, and that's why we mentioned those things. Also, in the Talmud, the tractate Shabbat, this tractate of the Talmud deals extensively with the laws of Shabbat, detailing the 39 prohibited categories of work, the melachot that we just talked about, and their derivations from the activities involved in constructing the tabernacle. In the other tractate of the Talmud called Beitzah, also discusses Shabbat laws, particularly those related to the preparations for the holidays. And that's something we're going to be talking in the other lessons about how to prepare for Shabbat, how to start getting ready for that first ascension. Then we're going to talk about the other lesson is going to be about the second ascension. And then the third one is going to be about the other lesson is going to be about the third ascension. In the Mishnah Shabbat provides a foundation of discussion of the laws of Shabbat, rather later expanded upon the Talmud. Also, halachic quotes and commentaries such as the Mishneh Torah by Maimonides, Rambam, particularly on the Sefer Semanim, Book of Times, which includes laws related to Shabbat, outlining the prohibited activities and the philosophical underpinnings of Shabbat observance. Also, a book written by Rabbi Joseph Caro called Shulchan Aruch, in the section Orach Chaim, which deals with daily, weekly, and holiday observance, providing practical laws of Shabbat. Also, you're going to find in Aruch, HaShulchan, and Mishnah Berurah, commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch that further explain and provide detailed guidance on Shabbat laws. So we study Kabbalah. There's also Kabbalistic texts that are going to give us insights on Shabbat and its holiness. One of those books of Kabbalah books is the Zohar, the foundational work of Jewish mysticism, which offers deep insights into the spiritual significance of Shabbat. It discusses the sanctity of Shabbat, the mystical implications of rest, and the elevation of the soul during this holiday. And this is something that we're going to be talking about, the elevation of the soul. Writings of the Ari, the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, further elaborate in the mystical aspects of Shabbat, including the special spiritual opportunities and practices associated with the day. Also, we're going to find modern works, and one of these works I mentioned in the second lesson of this series, the book The Shabbat, or the Sabbath, by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Herschel, a contemporary classic that explores the philosophical and spiritual dimensions of Shabbat. Herschel introduces the idea of Shabbat as a palace in time, emphasizing the sanctity of time over space and the importance of rest and spirituality. Another modern work, is Peninei Halacha by Rabbi Eliezer Melamed. It's a modern series of halachic works that provide accessible explanations of Shabbat laws and their spiritual significance. Also, I just want to add there. There's a book that came to me as a gift. Um, it's a book by the Eruv Publishing and a very good Kabbalah teacher, Rav Dover Pinson. It's called The Mystery of Shabbat Rediscovered. Um, it's also a good book. Uh, it has a lot of insights as well there. Modern works that can help us understand more Shabbat and see more in depth what is it all about. These texts collectively provide a comprehensive understanding of why work and changes are prohibited in Shabbat, emphasizing the themes of rest, sanctity, spiritual focus, and continuity of tradition. They form the basis for Jewish practice and offer deep insights into the philosophical and mystical dimensions of Shabbat observance. So it's basically all these things, but also we will add, as we continue with these lessons, that it's a good opportunity, um, especially for this spiritual focus and sanctity, because there's an ascension of the soul, in which the soul ascends and connects, and this is something that will take us to what is called a special soul. That we have a special soul, special light, an extra light, an extra soul during that day. Now let's talk about Eruv. Remember, we talk about these boundaries, right? And the prohibitions, carrying, moving objects between domains, right? Private and public spaces. We're going to be talking about the Eruvin, not in the halachic point of view in depth like that, but the reason we're going to talk about this is because we want to see it from the Kabbalah point of view, okay? And we're going to spend some time on this. So Eruv translate to mixture, right? Even though sometimes you're going to see that it is translated in English as boundaries, and the reason is because it is a boundary where you can have this type of mixture, right? The word also comes, with the spices, when you are in Sukkot celebrating, you're gonna have, the Eruv with you, mixing of spices. And Eruv is a symbolic boundary recognized in Jewish law that allows observant Jews to carry certain items and perform certain activities within its perimeter on the Sabbath or Shabbat, which would otherwise be prohibited in public spaces, would be considered melachot work, right? You're changing something from one thing to another, or basically you are transporting an object from here to there. So you change something, you change the position of this object, right? So this is why these Eruvins, the Eruvim are created, the Eruv, the law of Eruv. The Shabbat observed from Friday evening to Saturday evening involves restrictions on various activities, including carrying objects outside of one's private domain. Now, there are key points about an Eruv. The purpose, the main function of an Eruv is to create a larger private domain by linking multiple private and public spaces. This allows for activities like carrying keys, pushing strollers, and transporting food and prayer books within the area, which are not allowed in public spaces on the Shabbat. So what you're going to see is that these areas are basically common areas between the community, and in that way, we can do this within the community. But if a person is and this is what you're going to see a lot of, especially in the Orthodox community, you're going to see that they live very close to the synagogue. So in that way, they're able to walk to the synagogue and carry certain stuff to the synagogue, okay? And that synagogue and their houses are within that Eruvim, a common space. The structure. An Eruv is often constructed using existing natural man-made boundaries such as walls, fences, and utility poles. These are connected with strings or wire, forming a continuous enclosure that symbolically transforms public area into a private one. Where I live, the local rabbi, Orthodox rabbi, does an inspection of this Eruvim, and it's basically a cable, right? A wire that goes from utility pole to utility pole, forming these or marking these boundaries for Shabbat. And if you don't live within that boundary, then you cannot do, the things that the people that are within that boundary can do. So this community that are living within these boundaries, within this Eruv, can push strollers, can carry keys with them and everything as they go to the synagogue and back. But if you live, like in my case, outside the Eruv, you cannot do that beyond your own personal boundaries, okay? And that's the whole thing, because your Eruv is basically your domain. Rabbinical supervision. The creation and maintenance of an Eruv requires rabbinical oversight to ensure it meets the specific requirements of Jewish law. The boundaries must be checked regularly and confirmed they remain intact. Community impact. An Eruv can significantly impact the daily lives of observant Jewish families, enabling greater participation in communal and religious activities by easing some restrictions of the Shabbat, because they're living in a common area, and that common area becomes an area in which it's become a personal area as well. But if you're outside the Eruv, like in my case, and then your personal Eruv is it's not a public domain, it's your private domain. So you cannot do those type of work beyond your own personal boundaries, right? Now, the historical context. The concept of an Eruv has ancient roots in Jewish tradition, with the discussion found in the Talmud. Over time, the construction of Eruvim, plural for the Eruv, right, has evolved to adapt to contemporary urban settings. So like I said, the city that I live within, the Jewish community, the Orthodox Jewish community, they have this marking with a wire that goes from utility pole to utility pole, marking basically that boundary. There are Kabbalistic concepts relating to the Eruv. The first one is the unity and oneness. A symbol of unity, the Eruv symbolizes the unification of separate domains into single cohesive entity. This reflects the Kabbalistic principle of achieving oneness and harmony in the universe, mirroring the divine unity of God. Also, connecting worlds. In Kabbalistic thought, the physical and spiritual worlds are interconnected. The Eruv represents the bridging of these realms, allowing the sanctity of the Shabbat to permeate everyday life. So, what we are going to see is that this has to do with these three elevations or ascensions of the worlds, as we talked before. And the Eruv is going to be this line over here, which is called the Parsa. And from there, it is considered not holy. And here is considered Kedusha, right? Holy. So Shabbat is Kadosh, is holy. Beyond Shabbat, like the days of the week, there's no holiness there. That's how we need to do a separation, a Havdalah, right? Between the holy and the secular, between light and darkness. And it's because we came from an ascension and now we're going to the weekdays, which is a descent. But it's in the Kabbalah say every time you celebrate Shabbat, it's always an ascent. The Havdalah just means that you are in a different level, but it feels like a descent, because the soul always, the closer it gets to the Creator, the farther it thinks it is, right? So, and this is, basically where the Eruv comes from. The spiritual root of the Eruv comes from this parsa, this limitation in spirituality, in which you have the world of Asilut, and the world of Briya, Yetzirah, and Asiya, which are considered days of work. Once you are in Shabbat, there's no works, right? No melachot. But if you're within these boundaries, you're allowed to use what is called the vessels of bestowal. You are allowed to do certain things as long as you're within the boundaries of the vessels of bestowal, meaning that you're doing enough for the sake of your soul, or you're doing these type of actions for the sake of the Creator. And that's basically what the Eruv idea is trying to tell us. Okay, now, so connecting the worlds, right? Connecting the worlds. Why? Because it is making the words ascend, and it's connecting the word of Asilu with the lower words of Briya, Yetzirah, and Asiya. The other one is boundaries and holiness. Sacred boundaries. The root demarcates a sacred space within the mundane world, a concept central to Kabbalistic teachings. It establishes a boundary that transforms the ordinary into something holy, aligning with the idea of creating sanctified spaces within the physical world, right? So we talk about that parts of that line that divides the holy and the secular, right? It also has to do with tikkun, rectification. And the reason for that is because the word of Asilut is a word of tikkunim, right? It's a word of repairing. It's a word that is going to repair by creating the 6 days of creation, starting with Chesed, Geburat, Tiferet, right? And so on and so forth until Shabbat, which is, ascending again those to those levels. So this is very important to keep in mind because the concept of tikkun or spiritual rectification is vital in Kabbalah. The Eruv can be seen as an act of tikkun, where setting boundaries help to repair and elevate the material world by infusing it with spiritual intent and purpose. Now, spiritual enclosure, right? Protection and elevation. The idea of the Eruv, Kabbalistically, an Eruv can be viewed as a spiritual enclosure that offers protection and elevates those within its boundaries. It serves as a metaphor for the protective and nurturing aspects of the divine presence, the Shekhinah, which we're going to talk about that, right? That's the collective soul of Israel, right? The divine presence of the Creator in us, and it's considered that is from the feminine aspect, right? And that's why we welcome the Shabbat, but we're welcoming also the bride of Shabbat. Like every Shabbat, there's a wedding between the Creator and His people, and the soul of His people, which is this the feminine aspect, the desire to receive and the desire to bestow together. So we have also the inner and outer dimensions. The Eruv creates a delineation between inner and outer dimensions, reflecting the Kabbalistic theme of inner spiritual work manifesting outwardly. It encourages the community to bring inner sanctity into the external environment, and you're gonna see why the Kabbalist emphasizes so much in Shabbat doing certain things before Shabbat, and then during Shabbat why we do certain prayers in a different way that other communities or regular communities. And it's because we are not only doing the prayers is not just something that we have to go through in order to, let's say, practice it because it's our tradition, right? But it's an opportunity for connection and meditation. That's why we have, these scanning of the 72 names of God, and there's this yichud of the names of God within the prayers that we don't read aloud, but as we are reading the prayers, we are actually looking at them in order to understand the connection between these two names of the Creator and all that. Okay, so this is important. So remember, Shabbat is the word of Atzilut, and what we're having is an opportunity in which we are connecting to this level of creation that is absolutely holy and is a gift from the Creator. And you mentioned, I'm going to be mentioning this a lot. The gift from the Creator. It's a gift. Shabbat is a gift. Okay. Now, what is all this, right? Where is Shabbat? So if you are a student of Kabbalah for a while, and you have been studying with us with the uh, uh, beginners lessons that we have on our website and also on YouTube, and the intermediate lessons, you will be familiarized with this. And this is basically a kli, a vessel that receives the direct light. The direct light is reflected back by the Ochoser, right? So this is light given by the Creator. This is the light that are creating the vessels of bestowal. So we receive the light only if it pleases the Creator. And the orpinimi is the light that goes inside the vessel and makes these changes and refines the vessel. And then there's the Or Makif, which is the surrounding light, which is our potential, meaning who we are for real and what we are going to become. So we have these different lights, the internal and the external, that are constantly working and pressuring us to desire that. So within this is a spiritual system. What is the siyum here, from the tabur to the siyum? What we're going to see is that this is divided into two. So the tabur, where is the tabur, right? We're talking about the tabur. So the tabur is here. So below the tabur, meaning, maybe change the slide, meaning down here, this is where we are working. So we're working with vessels of bestowal, but in the whole scheme of creation, we're working also in this world of or vessels that are not refined yet, right? Because this is where correction needs to happen in order to ascend more and more and refine the vessel into a vessel of receiving in order to please the Creator, right? And that's what we're going to do. So let's I'm gonna be talking a little bit about this correction that is carried out during the day of Shabbat. So according to the Kabbalists, the day of Shabbat, it's tikkun, right? Like we mentioned in here is tikkun, the concept tikkun, spiritual rectifications via Kabbalah, and the Eruv can be seen as an act of tikkun. Why is that? Because it has to do with the Parsuf Adam Harishon. According to the Kabbalist, Malchut of the world of Atzilut is raised to the level of Bina, right? So Malchut of the world of Atzilut is from the aspect of receiving, and is raised to the level of Bina, which is the aspect of giving, bestowing. And this is achieved by in three phases, right? Three elevations. Three elevations. And the normal condition of the world of Atzilut is called weekdays, and the weekdays are right here, where it's called the place of Briah Yetzirah, right? And basically these are 2 days, 2 days, 2 days are 6 days, and this will be the 7th day. So the normal condition of the world of Atzilut is called a weekday. During such day, the world of Atzilut is illuminated by an incomplete light that spreads down the parsa, right? It spreads down the parsa. And after this, greater light comes down from above and gives the world of Atzilut higher attributes, making it move up a level, right? So we're going to see that it moves up. First ascension, right? And there's some other stuff, that terminologies I'm gonna, but basically saying Amarhut is located in the place of Serampin, and Serampin now reaches the level of Abba Ve'ima. Abba Ve'ima replaces Arich Ampin, which in turn rises to the level of Atik, which finally rises higher to into Sag. So basically what you see is that with this ascension, Serampin is going to be in the level of Abba Ve'ima, right? So this is Abba Ve'ima. Here's Abba Ve'ima. And Serampin is going to reach that level. The first elevation of the world of Asilut takes place on Friday evening, which is called Erev Shabbat. This progression is called a arousal from above, right? There's a Mainuchbin, which is the arousal from below, the raising of the waters from below. But this kind of ascension on Erev Shabbat is from the aspect of man, which is the masculine water from above. And it's also called Ataruta Deletata in Aramaic, right? In our world, these correspond to days, weeks, time, and all. It doesn't depend on us. It depends on the laws of nature, and over which we have no control, right? The next phase elevates the world of Atzilut one level higher. Now Malchut is on the level of Abba Ve'ima, and it has the what is called the aspect, or receive this aspect of receiving, not receiving, bestowing. Okay, so now what we have, is your image here, and this is the Nukhba of Serampin. So it takes that praise, right? Then Ima is already here, right, on the second ascension. Then Nukhba is gonna go to that level as well, and this is where we have a Shabbat, right? What's happening is during this ascension, Malchut receives this intention to give, right? This intention to bestow for the and if he receives, it receives for the Creator's sake. Now it has what is called a screen, right? And this screen, there's a Sivudaka, hitting of the light. Let me change this so you can understand what I'm talking about. So the masach here, that's a screen, and the sivug is basically a hitting of the light on that screen. And two things are going to happen. It will receive in order to bestow, and what it cannot receive in order to bestow, it will reflect it back to the Creator and will become or makif. It will become potential, the potential for that vessel, for this soul to develop, right? Now, based on these attributes of Abba Ve'ima that Malchut receives, it receives the attributes of Abba Ve'ima and also the attributes of Malchut of Ein Sof. Malchut creates a new parsuf called Adam HaRishon, which is what we see here. Now, this soul, this parsuf is a soul, and it's in that level. And that spiritual states for the Kabbalists are called Erev Shabbat, right? Friday evening, Shabbat, which is Saturday, Motzi Shabbat, Saturday evening, and they might be experiencing during this day according to the calendar, but there's another Shabbat, all right, in which there are no prohibitions and there's no Eruv, no limits, and that Shabbat is the personal Shabbat. Okay, so then the Kabbalists explain, the ascent from the world of Biyah to the world of Atzilut is called Saturday or Shabbat. The portion ranging from Tabur or of Galgalta and the Parsa is Shabbat. So they're explaining basically that from Tabur to the Parsa, this is the Shabbat, right? And the first ascent is the ascent of the world of Bria to the world of Atzilut. The second one is the ascent of Yetzirah to the world of Atzilut. And the third one relates to Asya. So Bria, Yetzirah, and then Asya. And what are we doing when we're celebrating or we're observing Shabbat? We are at the same time elevating the 6 days of the week. So these 6 days of the week are not only days that we're working physically in space and time, and also spiritually by studying Torah and things like that. After those 6 days, and when Shabbat comes in, we're elevating all that work, all the things that we did, we're elevating it to a higher level in which there's no need to worry about that work anymore. Whatever was incomplete is still incomplete in the physical world, but in that day of Shabbat is not considered incomplete. It has its own completion, right? So it's good to keep that in mind. Then he mentions, that when a person reaches the first spiritual world of Asiyah, during this third phase of ascent, right, the person reaches the world of Atzilut and experiences the spiritual Shabbat. And this is why it is said that if you are doing your spiritual preparation for Shabbat, during that third ascent that happens in the Shabbat, if you connect to this world of Asiyah, you enter Shabbat like it's supposed to be. But there's also different Shabbat, right? This man then, will be brought back to the initial state because his ascent was not the result of his own effort. It was a gift from above. So that's why it's a Shabbat, a weekday Shabbat is a gift from above. It was a gift given to you. But there's another Shabbat, and that is because we need to come back. We need to come down. Man is egoistic in nature, right? And this is why the spiritual is perceived as negative. However, man never degrades himself when he walks the path of spiritual progression, right? We just see, it's so much here, and I can do nothing. I can do nothing. I cannot change anything. And that's why sometimes, some people think that Shabbat or connecting to Shabbat is something negative because it's not inflating his egoism, and the ego is asking for help at that time, right? So then the Kabbalists tell us that when all the words of Biyah ascend to the word of Atzilut, it is still possible to work with desires located below the Parsa, meaning here, up to the Chaseh of the word of Yetzirah. So in this ascent, we can work all the way with desires from here, right? Desires from here all the way to here. And this is why in our work, we're allowed during Shabbat to cross the limits of the city, but only in the limits of the city within the boundaries of the Tehum Shabbat, within this Eruv, right? The distance is measured as 2,000 amma, which is approximately, if we're going to translate that into modern time measurements, 300 feet, and 70 amma. How is the distance divided? So let's go back to the previous diagram. From the Parsa to the Chased world of Bria, it is called Ibur. Ibur means impregnation, and equals 70 amma. The distance including the world of Atzilut, even though it is located outside of it. It is an outer strip surrounding the city. The distance from the Chaseh of the world Bria to the Chaseh of the world Yetzirah equals 2,000 amma. The whole distance between the Parsa and the Siyum is 6,000 amma. So 2,000, 2,000, 2,000, which is, forget about the zero, that will be 2 days, 2 days, 2 days. That's with 6 weekdays. But if we are looking at the development of the whole humanity as a whole, spiritually, we're talking about 2,000 years, 2,000 years, and 2,000 years. Those are 6,000 years of the development of our soul and the development of our human spiritual parsuf or soul in this space and time, right? And those are the 2000 amma that it talks here, and the 6000 amma. The portion of the words of Bia stretching from Chaseh of Yesirah to Sion is called the filthy place, or the Mador Klipot, which is this area here, and this is where we fell, right? When we committed the sin. So we were elevated when we were in the Garden of Eden. Olam Atzilut is also the Garden of Eden. It's Shabbat, Olam Haba, the word to come, the Messianic age. But when we committed the sin, we fell down to the Mador Klipot, the place of the Klipot, okay? In this dark place where the light can only be perceived through the filters of the Olamot, the worlds of Asiyah, Yesirah, and Bria. It is a place, according to the Kabbalists, devoid of sanctity, Kedusha, and one cannot go there during Shabbat. So we cannot go there during Shabbat, right? When a man ascends to the spiritual world and crosses the Machzon, he needs to go through the Mador Klipot. For him, the transition to the spiritual does not take place during Shabbat, when the world of Bia are in the world of Asilut. The spiritual Shabbat does not begin at the same time for everybody. This is a spiritual Shabbat, right? That we're talking about. A man can ascend the spiritual worlds and cross the Machzon. This is personally developing ourselves. This is an effort from below. Shabbat on the weekdays is an effort from above, a gift from the Creator. Now this is from down upward. This is us. We are ascending the spiritual worlds, right? The spiritual Shabbat does not begin at the same time for everybody. In the world, Shabbat is set at different times in different countries, according to the different countries and cities. But a person is not under this influence of the sun and the moon and the calendar, right? So it can be, let's say, Shabbat in Jerusalem right now, and a person can be living in California, which is a whole bunch of hours of difference. And even though it's Shabbat in Jerusalem, the person might be in the state of Shabbat already in California, if he ascends, or she ascends to those levels. So these souls are lifted to the world of Atzilut to show them an inherent limit existing there, so that they can keep themselves within there. Now, the actions a person undertake stem from their own efforts. This is the goal of creation, which implies, that you need to have this personal ascent. And Shabbat exists in order to show a person what is happening in higher worlds, so we can strive for it, so we can attain these different levels. So even though we are participating in a communal Shabbat, we can also participate on this personal Shabbat according to the Kabbalists, because that Shabbat is just a taste of what we are supposed to attain in the future, which is a connection with that light of the Garden of Eden, the light of the beginning of creation, where we were one soul, called Adam Harishon. To the achievement of correction is when this light of the Creator shines directly and is not longer filtered by these different worlds of Bria, Yesirah, and Asiyah. And the shining of the light it doesn't have any more filters, and it brings total delight to the vessel, meaning brings total delight to the creature. So when that happened because now the light has no restrictions, and because the light has no restrictions, the whole tikkun, the whole purpose of the Olam Atzilut, right, then takes place. We are not only fixing our soul, but we're fixing also the Shevirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessel, in which we have these sparks that fell down, and now we need to redeem those sparks, right? It's very important, to go through the intermediate Kabbalah classes so you can understand more what we're talking about here. And this is why Shabbat is is very important. It's not just a day during the week, it's also a spiritual state. During the week, we celebrate it together as a whole congregation, right? As a whole people of Israel. But also personally, we need to make an effort to achieve that level of Shabbat, to attain that level of Shabbat, a spiritual level of Shabbat during the weekdays as well, in our personal Shabbat. Okay, so I hope that this lesson haven't left you confused. If I have left you confused, I mean that I accomplished my job, because that's the whole point, to make you feel that you need to look for more information about this. But there's a different articles that you can find of Kabbalah. There's a book. I have the book here. It's by Rav Michael Lakeman, but it's basically the commentaries of Rabbi Lakeman, but it was written by Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag. Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag is also known as the father of modern Kabbalah, as we know it today, like B'nai Baruch, Kabbalah Center, and most people that study Kabbalah, like me, we are studying Luriani Kabbalah. So this Luriani Kabbalah is based on the modern works done by Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag. And one of the articles that he wrote in order to help beginners is Ticha. Ticha means like introduction, right? And then the group B'nai Baruch did a good translation of that work with commentaries from Rabbi Lakeman. And is this book here? Let me see. It's Science of Kabbalah. And it has P'ticha there. And in there, you have basically the wisdom of Kabbalah in a nutshell, and also the explanation of these three ascents as well. Not in details, in order to know these things in details, you have to go to the other work of Rabbi Yehuda Ashlag. It's an extensive work called Talmud Eser Sefirot, in which these three ascents are explained in more detail. Well, anyway, if you have any questions, leave your questions below, or the contact page in the website www.receivingtheupperlight.com, and I will answer those questions or send you other articles and things like that I've found about this, if you feel that you need more information. Okay, so I hope this has helped you understand Shabbat on a deeper level. And these ascensions, like I mentioned before in this lesson, are just a prelude of what we're going to be talking in future lessons. So if you know that there's three ascents of the worlds during Shabbat, then you will understand the three meals, then you understand the prayers that we're doing, the certain actions that we're doing during these different times of within the day of Shabbat. Okay, so I'll see you in the next lesson. Shalom, and be well.